Welcome to Base and Boundaries podcast. I'm your host, Amy G, and this is your one-stop shop for all things mental health and music.
Hi everyone, welcome to Base and Boundaries. I have been so excited today to have this interview. We've had this booked a while, haven't we? But so my name's Amy and I'm going to introduce you to Chris Breedon. Hello, my lovely, how are you?
I'm living the dream, sweltering a bit. See my red face?
It is hot, actually. Yeah. But tell everybody about what you have done and why it's led you to do the work that you're doing now.
Right, yeah. So, hi everybody. I'm Chris. I served 40 years in the Royal Air Force. I left the Royal Air Force a year ago, last February, so about 15, 16 months ago. And I slipped into running my business full time, which is a Prospero mediation and training. And we're mostly focused on helping people solve workplace conflict, community conflict, i.e. where you've fallen out with your neighbor over the bin or a car parking slot or a hedge or whatever, and relationship mediation where, a father's fallen out with their daughter, that sort of stuff. And I deal in those areas of conflict. And the driver for me is basically trying to help people get rid of that stress that is built up by conflict. Because often if it's left, and it is often left a long time before people try and solve the conflict with an outside neutral professional, and it affects people's mental health. And they go downhill, sometimes without even realizing it. They'll soldier on at work for a long time until eventually they snap and they go off sick for a long period of time. And that in itself causes more stress for the people that are left at work picking up your work. And for your manager who can't quite understand why it is that you were okay yesterday, a little bit down the dumps maybe, because you've been like that for, 8 months now? And now suddenly you've pulled a big sickie on me and now I'm without a person. And all that adds to people's stress. So my primary motive in this business is to help people get out from under that stress. And that is motivated because about, let me think, seems a long time, about 15 years ago, I was in the Royal Air Force and two young girls, young officers put in a complaint against me. And I went through then what was an embryonic conflict management process in the Royal Air Force, which was particularly poorly delivered, very badly managed, and took best part of 3 years to resolve. I mean, in that 3 years, I went downhill pretty rapidly. I was living away from home, living in a mess and commuting at weekends, and the stress of it was just immense. And I've always, I suppose like most servicemen, I've always seen myself as being strong, resilient, can deal with anything that you throw at me. But what happened was, I was unaware of this. With the stress of it all, I would, that's the best way to put this, I would relive an incident that happened to me in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And at the time when I'm asleep and reliving it's real. It's absolutely happening. I'm back in the compound and this sort of stuff. And what was happening was I'd wake up in the morning thinking I'd had this dream, but I'd clearly scratched myself quite a lot. And it was but I know that now. At the time, I was convinced that this person was in my room and must have manifested itself several thousand miles away and to do this to me. So I had that, and it was I'd actually reasoned with myself that this was happening. This thing was arriving in my room and attacking me at night, and then I was waking up suffering the consequences. And even though I'd say that to myself, there was a little voice in my head telling me that I must be stark raving mad. This couldn't possibly be happening. I had to be doing it to myself. And I didn't report that to anybody, because the military can be quite rough on you. So in the job and the career that I was in, anything that they thought might be affecting your mental health made you a bit of a security risk. So you'd immediately lose all of your security clearances and they would remove you from the workplace and your profession you did. And then you'd feel like you're being made to sit in the corner with a pair of underpants on your head and pencils up your nose saying wibble, because everyone just thought you'd lost it. And that was it. There was very little support. So that felt like an extra punishment. So you hid it from people. So that went on for quite a long time. And eventually I went into the system, the medical system. And that was only manifested because I had to have an annual ECG as part of my REF medical, which meant I had to take my shirt off to get the machine all plugged on me. And I remember she was a young, pregnant REF nurse, came into the room and sort of said, okay, you have to take your shirt off. So I took my shirt off, and then she could see the physical reality of me having scratched myself a lot. And she almost passed out. And she was like, I can't do this. And sort of left the room. And then a young male nurse came in and just didn't bat an eyelid. So just stick these stickers on, get your ECG done. Then I have to go to the doctor, who's like, oh, yeah, I've got your ECG results. Yeah, everything's fine. Whatever. So now we're just, you just take off your shirt and I'll, listen to your heart and all that sort of business. And I'm like, oh. So I took off my shirt. And again, he was really good. Did the full medical, didn't say a word, put it all on, got a clean bill of health. And he was like, do you want to tell me about this?
Yeah.
And I'm like, not really. He's like, okay, I can put you in touch with people if you want to. And then it's like, okay, I told him the stress I was under with this complaint and investigation. And the reason the stress had manifested itself was because the REF basically made up its mind as soon as the girls complained that I was guilty.
Okay.
And that's how I felt I was being treated. And I was treated very, very badly for the entire time the investigation was going on, until eventually, sort of 2 and a bit years in, the police who were investigating, it was really about bullying. I think it wasn't anything else. And the girls were re-interviewed. And then there was a big anomaly in their story, sort of 2.5 years later, which when they sort of went in to investigate, the girls back in, interviewed them now under caution. And at that point, one of the girls broke and said that they'd made it all up. They didn't expect the system to have done what it did. And by the time they thought about coughing, it was already too late. They were going to get in trouble.
Wow.
So I got a full apology from the REF at the time. The head of the REF called me down. In fact, I was called down, but I didn't know that I was going to be exonerated. It was like the investigation's all over, and it wasn't the head of the REF, to be fair. It was another high-ranking REF officer. But I was called down, go in your parade uniform. And as far as I knew, that's when they were going to give me, you're guilty. You're now booted out or whatever. And they even managed that badly. So I still, right up until the moment they told me I'd been completely exonerated, I thought I was going to be found guilty.
Wow.
And, the relief was palpable. And then I sat back, sort of dusted myself off. As you can imagine, it had a massive effect on my marriage, the stress and everything, and my family. But it was almost like the system had gone, oh, well, okay, no, you've been found not guilty now. You've been completely exonerated. We're a bit sorry for the last 3 years. Yeah, off you go.
Yeah.
And I was never, ever, ever able to fully reset. But it was that then when I started to think about what I wanted to do when I left. I didn't want to join the defense industry. I didn't want to go and work for anybody else because, as it turned out, I realized after 40 years of being in the military, I don't like taking orders. So I was like, I don't want to go work for anybody else because I just don't like being told what to do. So I go and work for myself and just get told what to do by the wife. And then it was, okay, well, if I want to do that, what can I do? And I came up with Prospero. And the driving bit was, I know how people feel when they're going through that workplace stress, or an unresolved conflict, or one that is being badly managed, that is taking too long. And I know what that feels like. I did contemplate suicide. I don't know whether I'd ever have really gone through with it, but at the time I know I was serious.
Yeah.
And obviously clearly I didn't. And that's really what motivates me, because I've been there and it's awful. The toll it takes on you is you just can't quantify it. So, and I just want to add there, I don't have PTSD. I am very lucky in that. I had, I think, what was diagnosed as a combat stress related disorder. And it just means that when I get stressed, which I have to say I haven't since I left the Air Force, to be fair. When I get stressed, I can dream and relive stressful situations for me. I'm not, I don't have nightmares. I just relive something. I don't have any feelings of guilt. So I am very lucky, because I know the toll that PTSD takes on people, which is significant. But yeah, so sorry that went on for a bit, but that was me and my
No,
why.
it's fascinating, and that's what a lot of my listeners, they love stuff like this, because it does delve into that mental health aspect and how important it is to look after ourselves, especially at work. I know that when I met you at that event, we had a brief discussion about previous workplaces that I've had, the toxic environments. Prime example for me, I worked at a very large coffee chain, and I did go on sick because I was on a lot of hours that I thought were manageable at the time. But I've got, small children at home, and I'm thinking, oh, it'll be easy. I went back full time. And I know in hindsight now, I wish I hadn't have gone back full time because it was too much. But the pressure that I had was oh my Lord, like it was just every day was a mess. And you go in and you would get up in the morning, you would dread just going to work. And I was like that. I was fine. Yeah, I was a bit grumpy, bit moody. I had a catastrophic break on shift. My son was being bullied at school, and he'd been punched by another kid. And I got the phone call, and I saw my phone was on by the coffee machine, and I was talking to a customer. I said, I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to multitask here. It's my kid's school. And I just dropped the phone after this call, and I just broke down in tears. And I just went, I can't do this anymore. And I went on sick, and I was then burdened by the news that my colleagues who were on the same job as me, they were angry at me for being on sick because they're then lumbered with my work. My boss is saying stuff to other colleagues, and I'm hearing stuff about me. I go for my back to work meeting, and one of the managers sat there and went, well, no one wants you back here. And I sat there with it, and I went, oh my God. And I remember walking out, I got in my car, broke down in tears, but I went, no, I'm going back. I'm not quitting, because my previous job, very similar circumstances, both the managers did get sacked in the end from the previous place I worked at for bullying, ironically. And I got to that point where I did say, I'm going to go back, but I probably lasted a few weeks and then I quit. And I do still go in. I've got no ill feelings towards people. I will go in, chat with them, whatever. But that period of time was horrendous. And that's why I was so grateful to have that conversation with you. So with that being said, do you find that a lot with the work that you do now, that you have people that are effectively at breaking point and then they have to sort of get this kind of stuff implemented into their work?
Yeah, I would say now, because I mediated as well in the RAF after my sort of incident when I got myself trained and
Yeah.
sort of got involved. But in those mediations and all the mediations I've done outside in Civvy Street, I would say the overwhelming number of mediations, one or both parties involved have gone sick for a significant period of time. And I wouldn't say everybody potentially needed it, but it becomes especially if the conflict's being poorly managed. And there is a lot of poor management out there. There's lots, I just read a stat this morning that 82% of managers in the UK don't get any management training when they get appointed as a manager. I mean, I knew it'd be quite large just in my experience of what I've seen. So maybe there's an instance of we're not training people enough. People get promoted. They don't come into work that day to make people's lives horrible or badly manage a conflict.
Yeah.
But most people, I think, they try their best to give it a go and help, and invariably are pretty clumsy with it. And it doesn't help. I see so many. I pick up mediations where facilitated chats have gone wrong because there's been no empathy or no sympathy and no trying to get to the bottom of what is really going on and understanding people's thought processes, which is what we do in mediation. So certainly the level of stress in workplace mediations I'm trying to think just off the top of my head, any workplace mediations I have done in the last year or so where nobody's been off sick. And there might be one,
Yeah.
might be one. Um, and it's that management of that mental health process.
Yeah.
And then, like I think, like you're saying, is when people get their back to work, that needs to be delivered again with some sort of compassion and understanding. You know, it may well be that that person is coming back to work, but if you haven't solved the dispute, or maybe you've solved it by doing a facilitated chat and not a mediation, which means basically you've imposed as a manager your solution to this problem. It doesn't mean that you've necessarily solved the conflict, especially
Mm.
if two people are going at each other. Um, and so they get back to work. Sometimes they want to delve in a bit too much about what has been going on and what has affected you.
Yeah.
And unless they've done that, like, mental health first aid training, or they've got mental health awareness in their organization, people again can make a real ham-fisted job of that. Again, I don't think deliberately. I think they try, they've read a bit on Google, or they've listened to a conversation somebody else has had and thought, like, give it a go. So yeah, I think workplace is pretty bad. In community mediation, where neighbors have fallen out,
Yeah.
it's very often that I get told, "Oh, I've gone sick to the doctor. I'm on antidepressants because of all of this." And if anything, community mediations are worse in that they take a lot longer before somebody decides, "Oh, we need to get a mediator in to try and solve this problem,"
Mm.
if indeed they go down that route. So I say probably on average, my community mediations I do, if the dispute has only been going on for 3 or 4 years, I'm quite chuffed. You know,
Wow.
uh, I had one that had been going on for 17, and both people sort of either side of the fence are on antidepressants. They've left work because of the stress this is all causing them.
Gosh.
And you go in, essentially in 3.5, 4 hours. You've helped them solve their problem, and you can watch the relief and the stress just drain from people when they've come to an agreement, they've reset their friendship. And part of the media, especially in community mediation, part of the process is is trying to get them to remember when it was good. Because
Yeah.
by the time I've arrived, all their unconscious biases have kicked in, and all their confirmation bias, and they can't remember a time when me and the neighbor got on. And so we explore that, and you tend to get, "Oh, well, for the first year, it was really good. We used to go to the park with our kids together, or I'd water their plants when they were away." And you go, "Okay, so it was good at one stage." And they're like, "Yeah." And you go, "Okay, what was the catalyst? What was it that first broke, broke this relationship down?" But I've already made them think about when it was good.
Yeah.
And then we try, and because I don't come up with solutions as a mediator, that's not my job. Um, I constantly remind them of what good felt like, and that's where we'd like to go. They all go, "I don't want to go back there. I don't want it. I just want this problem solved." But there's nothing better than you get the agreement, and the two people who could barely be in the room together have given each other a great big hug, and off they go down to Costa to get a coffee while I'm filling out the sort of post mediation paperwork.
Love it.
And that in itself is worth its weight in gold, etc. And community mediations, we invariably, I deliver them for another organization that's non-profit. So I don't get paid for doing community mediations. So you do that for free.
Yeah.
But even so, it's just amazing that yeah, if you could bottle that feeling of having watched those people bury that hatchet and skip out feeling 5 stone lighter and having a brighter future, it's just brilliant.
And neighbors are a tricky one. I think I don't know somebody that hasn't had a tricky neighbor at some point, or those kinds of, when we first bought our house where we live now, my next door neighbor and we're thick as thieves, and I'm so grateful to have. But she said that the previous owners who owned my house were not And they used to be at loggerheads all the time, and it was over like silly, trivial things. And I find it fascinating how you can start off living there. I mean, I used to in say when I lived in Nottingham, I had a neighbour during COVID, and they had this rented house. I was renting mine, and it was, prime example. During COVID, they got a hot tub, and they put it so that the hot tub was pressing against my fence, which was attached to my house. And what it would do is when the bubbles were on, the house would start shaking, and it was such a nightmare. And I was heavily pregnant with my daughter, and I was just getting so overwhelmed. And then they'd have this song, and I can't listen to it now without feeling so angry. That Dance Monkey song that was out during that time, they had it on repeat because they knew I hated it.
Yeah.
Do you find that when you have those community-based issues, you do find issues like that? I mean, if I'd have known that sort of thing existed, I would have been like, right, go around there and tell them to pack it in.
So yeah, and it's not just community. So I'll just go immediately. If I was chatting to you now as part of a mediation, I'd immediately hone into some of the things you said there. So like, everyone's had a tricky neighbor, but they've never been the tricky neighbor themselves. So that's always where I go. Whenever I do a community mediation, the first person I speak to is they tell me the next door neighbor is the devil incarnate. And there's it's almost like buzzword bingo. I'm going through the list of adjectives that you're telling me about your neighbor. And then I go the next day or whatever, I go and see the neighbor, and, you come across a sort of, 74-year-old little grandmother who's sweet as, but then she tells you all the adjectives about her neighbor who I met yesterday, who seemed to be perfectly normal and all right.
Yeah.
So we get ourselves into a rut where we let our biases take over, and especially our sort of confirmation bias. And when we're in a conflict with people, we can never think anything good about them. And so even if they did something really nice, we subconsciously just dismiss it, because we think the reason they did something nice was there was an ulterior motive. They didn't do it just to be nice. They've got some other thing they're after. So we explore that. And I heavily rely on a program called DISC, which is a psychometric evaluation. It's a very simple one, very quick to do. But what it's shown me, being an accredited sort of trainer in it and debriefer, is there aren't tricky people and there aren't difficult people. There are people who are just different, and they approach things differently to us. They communicate differently to us. Some people we might take as being really blunt and rude, but for them, they are just direct communicators. They might be looking at us and going, God, talk about verbose. Why don't you just get to the point? And they're looking at their watches and like, oh God, are you still talking, sort of thing? Because you may well have picked it up. I'm what we call a high I on the DISC profile, which means, if you let me talk, I'll make your ears bleed. Because high I's like talking, they especially like telling stories and that sort of stuff. Whereas the D's are very direct. Let's just get straight to the point and that. So what in our workplace mediations, everyone who's involved in that as a participant, we give a free DISC profile to. So it gives us an idea of what their personality is like at work. And then we debrief them on how they are. They get a copy of all this too. But then as part of the joint meeting towards the end, we get them talking about the process, the DISC bit. And I then give them a fully detailed how Amy, with the scores she's got on her test, can best work with Chris, given the scores Chris has got on his test. Because you're not just D and you're not just an I, you're a mixture. And then I can look at that and go, okay, well, the next time and these are your strengths. This is where you both can get the best out of each other. This is where you really work well as a team. But these are your trigger points. And this is where the sort of like poo traps are. So if you've got to go down this route, just remember that Amy likes a lot of detail or whatever, and that you don't. So maybe let them talk a little bit about the detail because that's what they're comfortable with. Or, if you're going to go and ask Amy to do a particular thing, make sure you've thought about everything in the process, because she'll just come back and ask some questions. And if you haven't got the questions, she's not trying to make you look stupid. It's because she's already got questions now. Answer these questions and I'll do the job. Whereas some people go, well, you're just trying to make me look stupid now because I didn't think of those questions.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Or maybe think of those. So then Amy, and then you're saying that Amy knows that Chris is coming. who is going to make my ears bleed if I give him a chance, but I can't cut him short because he'll find that quite rude and offensive. So what I've got to do is find a way of communicating with Chris that I've got to listen for a little bit, because after he's been talking for 3 or 4 minutes, he'll eventually get round to answering the question I called him in for. But I've got to find a way of dealing with that, as opposed to going, Chris, please just get to the point. I haven't got all the time, because that'll irritate Chris. And I'll walk out going, how rude is she? I was just being nice. And, difficult. She's always really difficult when you talk to her. It's not, she's just different. She communicates differently. So seeing that and understanding how it all works really helps you in the process. And then getting people to understand. So I don't just go in and do the mediation, because that it's never easy, but that would be easier. I try and coach people as to why they think like they do, why they're acting like they do. And then maybe if we change that a little bit next time, it will be better. So they get a whole lot of conflict coaching. They get a bit of understanding about how they approach a problem and how the neighbor isn't tricky. They just do things differently and they see things differently. It might be a really trivial thing to you that whatever it is that your hedge is slightly over brushing their drive, and can't they just live with it for a bit or whatever? But you might not know, in the last house, they scratched their brand new car because the neighbor didn't trim the hedge, and it's irritated them. They don't want that again. They don't want to have another confrontation with you. They left their last house over a hedge and it was really stressful. And now they've arrived in this one, and we've got another neighbor who's not letting us cut the hedge because it's theirs, but it's encroaching. And you might be like, oh man, it's only a little bit over your boundary. What's the big problem? And they're like, oh no, they're big. So we all approach things differently. If you get people to understand that, then that helps them resolve the conflict, and we get people talking a bit more and understanding a bit more about the other person. And then the other thing is, of course, is perspective. What you see in a given moment is different from what I see, because we're different human beings, and our interpretations on things are different based on our lived experience, what our parents taught us, what our parents didn't teach us, where we've worked, where we went to school, what our friends say. And all of those things influence your perception of something that is going on. And it always gets to a point in most mediations where I always wait for it, is where somebody will call the other person a liar. That is not what I said. That is not what happened or whatever. And that's when I take my opportunity I've got a laminated number 6 on a piece of A4 paper, and I whip it out and I put it on the floor between us. I go, okay, what do you see? And Amy will say, I see a 6. And John will say, I see a 9. And I go, well, I see the letter B. Which two of us are lying? We're all looking at the same fact on the floor in front of us right now, and we're all seeing 3 different things. So just imagine when you're trying to remember what it was he said a year ago, or what it was he did, you'll remember it in a different way, because we all are wired differently. And that's not to say that their interpretation is wrong. It's just different from yours. And you could see as you go through the stress leaving people's bodies, as you give this little bit of coaching, and they start to understand that actually it is all right that we both have a different opinion. And maybe it was the way we communicated our different opinion to each other. And because most people don't have a psychometric profile to look at, and most people don't understand the mechanism of how conflict generates, we all do it. And you know what? I'm a mediator. I've been mediating, a long time now. We moved to this house that we're in partially because of a falling out with a neighbor in our last house. And we arrived here, and for the first few months it was great. And then we had a real my missus, I had a real war with a bloke a couple of doors down over car parking. And we're both in our 60s. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, I'm a mediator. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm also a human being. I get that thrown back at me a lot on LinkedIn. If I put a contrary opinion to what somebody's written, almost the very first thing that comes back is, call yourself a mediator. I'm like, yeah, but I'm also a human. So with this guy, we had a bit of a war, let's say. And just one day, he came down the road towards me. Something else had happened with my son, who was living at home with us at the time. And I sort of opened the door to fly out and have a go at what I'd just been told, having come home from work by my missus. And he's, oh, I just came down to sort of apologise to your son. I was out of order.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, well, you weren't going to apologise to me. We were still at war. And I'm like, well, should we all just apologise to each other and call it quits? You know, I don't know about you, mate, but I'm a bit old for this. And it was just like the relief. I felt the relief because you can see the relief in him. And he's like, do you mean it? And I'm like, absolutely. Look at us. We're grown men. You know, this is stupid. You know, I don't know about you, but this is where I'm gonna, where I'm gonna die. I'm not moving house anymore. So yeah, and we're like shook hands, and now we passed pleasantries. You know, he plays a lot of golf. We're right on a golf course, and I take the dog for a walk. I pick up golf balls that people have lost. You know, when I see him, like, yeah, mate, it's a bag of golf balls for you. You know,
Nice.
Our two little terriers who didn't like each other anyway. They're still at war. They hate each other.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's dogs though. That's what they're like.
I think they got it from us. Do you know what I mean? When we would go hammer and tongue.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I did think about something about how, how nowadays everything has a label. You've got people that would say they're left, people that would say they're right. And I'm one of them people that's quite forthcoming. I'll say it how it is. And I never would go out of my way to purposely hurt somebody. That's not my nature at all. But if as a prime example, I saw a video on YouTube earlier and someone was like, oh, my shop's been broken into, and they showed the CCTV footage and something weren't sitting with me. And I'm like, is this staged? Because they lifted up the shutter, but just pushed the door. And I says, but the door wasn't locked. So how have they got the shutter up and then just push the door unless someone hasn't locked the door? And if they haven't locked the door, then is it a break-in or is it an opportunity kind of thing? And people go, how can you say that this person's lost their livelihood? And I'm going, no, I'm just calling a spade a spade. The door wasn't locked. They had to force the shutter open. The door wasn't locked. So I was having this back and forth, and it's just had me thinking about another video that I'd seen about this lady. She's on TikTok and she was out in the garden and two neighbors were fighting over a hedge. And one of the women was like, look, just calm down. I'm sorry I've cut your fence, your hedge. I'm really sorry. And she's going, it's gone over my hedge. Blah, blah, blah. But then she's like, I've got PTSD. You're causing me unnecessary stress. I'm having counseling because of you. And she's like, look, I am genuinely sorry. It was the whole label factor that sits with me. People say, I'm this, I'm that, I have this, I have that. And you see it on TikTok profiles where they'll say, I have fibromyalgia, I have this, and you can do what you want. That's on you if you want to do that. I'm diagnosed with ADHD. However, I will talk about it, but it doesn't define who I am as a person. Do you find that with people where they make those discussions very openly about I have X, Y, and Z, because it's become a norm that people are reading off their medical history in a conflict? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So certainly in the mediations and the conflicts I see, a lot of people do that. And I think it's different from telling people they got ADHD, or that you're somewhere on the spectrum is different from people sort of bring out, I've got PTSD or I've got this thing or another. But I do see it a lot in mediations. And it's like, well, it doesn't really matter in this context that you have got PTSD because you are still involved in this conflict. And almost it's like, if you know that you've got PTSD and this sort of stress level is triggering you, then try and manage how you get involved in the conflict with the neighbor or the other person at work. Because if this conflict is triggering you and making life really difficult mentally, then think about how you approach that conflict. I'm not saying necessarily ignore it, because you may well be in the right and the other person may well be in the wrong. But again, most conflicts aren't really about right or wrong or apportioning blame. In fact, we never apportion blame in mediation. It's things have happened that you both interpreted differently, and then you haven't been able to discuss it in a calm manner, and you've let things get out of hand and explode, and all the other biases then come in. And yeah, I mean, I'm currently in a LinkedIn discussion. I put discussion rather than conflict. A guy put up a post a couple of weeks ago. I think he's in America. I'm not sure. about something that JD Vance had said, and
Okay.
I just disagreed with this person's stance, and so I put out, well, this is what I think. Um, and he came back immediately with the call yourself a mediator. Um,
Mm.
yes, I call myself a mediator, but I am a human being with my own opinions, and my opinion
Yeah,
just differs from
exactly.
yours. Well, I find it really amazing the number of people who immediately retort to call yourself a mediator because I have a different opinion, and we are still exchanging. Because his very next bit was he came out and said that he had he attacked me as a mediator, and he's also a TEDx speaker, is in his profile line. You can see, and I'm like, wow, I
Okay.
didn't attack you for being a TEDx speaker, with your opinions. Why do you think it's free? Have you watched my TEDx chat? I'm like, no, and neither am I. Anyway, well, it was about my infertility and my struggle with going through that and getting it righted. And I'm like, well, what has that got to do with attacking my profession? Let's get back to talking about what the original post was about something JD Vance had said about immigration. I said, because now you've wheeled
Yeah.
out, I'm a bad person because you were infertile. I'm a bad person because you were infertile once. Whereas actually, I just disagree with your political stance. And it's still been, and then he just led me another long diatribe about how bad a mediator I must be because I haven't acknowledged his story of infertility. It's like, mate, I don't mean to be mean, but I couldn't care less about your infertility. This started off with us having a disagreement about something JD Vance had said about immigration. You haven't once wanted to discuss why I have a different opinion
Yeah.
from you. You've just attacked me. And that happens a lot in conflict all over the place. People immediately go down another avenue. And the whole thing, you're always going to get conflict. Neighbors are always going to fall out. People at work are going to fall out. Families are going to fall out.
Mm.
But in the workplace, I think more care needs to be taken out of how the system manages the conflict.
Yeah,
Like
of
we just
course.
said, 82% of managers don't get any training, let alone start asking them to do mental health awareness training,
Yeah.
FRIM training, conflict management, on top of then doing all the leadership and management training that we'd expect them to do. So, but I think in the realm of things, especially this day and age, a good understanding of mental health, first aid, and the stress that unresolved conflict at work causes needs to be better understood, as
Mm.
opposed to people rolling their eyes that you've gone off sick because you had an argument with John in the office. And then people find out in 6 months' time that you and actually John have been arguing with each other for a year. Nobody's just really noticed or cared, and it's ground you both down.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
and getting that awareness of how to spot the initial phases of conflict. If people could get in really early, because you can watch the little bit of body language, you can pick up the terse comment. You're CC'd in an email, and it's like, why have you CC'd me in this quite short email? It's because I'm going to CC in the boss because he'll go through all the emails and he'll find this one where you were really terse and horrible. And I've now CC'd in the boss because A, I'm asking for a little bit of help maybe, or B, I want him to have a word with you about how you're treating me. Um,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, let's get in and facilitated chats. Very few people are trained to deliver them. Most of the ones I see or hear about are very badly delivered. Get you in. Okay, I've watched you. I've spoken to you both. I've listened to what you both told me, and my decision is, Amy, you're no longer working from home. You're back in Monday to Friday, and John, you're working nights. You know, get
Yeah.
don't bring your problems to me again. It's affecting the office, and I won't stand for it. And that's me. I've done my leader job. I've managed that situation well. And then both you have walked out. You're really peeved because you have to work from home 3 days a week because you're taking care of your sick mother or children or whatever.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And John did 3 years on nights 2 years ago, and you promised him he'd never have to do another night. And now you pick on nights because Amy's gobbed off a little bit. Hasn't solved your problem. It's
No.
just made your life worse. But then they sit back and go, yeah, get on the phone to HR. Yeah, sorted all that out. Read and Riot Act. They know what's what now. And all of it could be solved with a little bit of training, but and an understanding that all conflict ends up in stress. It all starts very, very simply a crossword, a difference of opinion. And if that's not managed, there's quite when we do conflict management training, there's like a ladder of
Mhm.
how this conflict builds. And then eventually, if you don't deal with it, you'll find that it's now everybody in the office or everybody in the workplace is involved. They've all got opinions, they're forming
Yeah.
sides, and then they start turning on each other. Um, and then what they think is, oh, do you know what? The whole troublemaker here is Amy, so we'll just get rid of Amy, and off they go. Off you go. You skip out, go straight to an employment lawyer. But the conflict is still going on because those people have all drawn sides. Um,
Yeah.
and I see it so many times. It's just a little bit of training, a little bit of understanding. But if I was to be told, okay, Chris, there's this much money in the budget, and we can train our manager in mental health awareness, first aid, whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
or conflict management, I would say go for the mental health bit first,
Yeah.
because having an awareness, the mental health bit, you can go in, understand where people are coming from, and we can get somebody to come and help manage that conflict. But if we try and manage the conflict without understanding the effect it has on a lot of people, not everybody, lots of people sail through conflict and don't have any issues. And if you get there early and you can solve it early, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's the stuff that's left festering um, that really, really destroys people's sense of well-being. And then they go off sick, and they go off sick for 6 weeks or whatever. They come back, you haven't solved the problem or the conflict. They feel bad because their mates
Yeah.
are all a bit peeved. That's if they come back, and there's often people that it just becomes a spiral, doesn't it?
And it is massive spiral because I still speak to people from previous jobs that I've left due to conflict. And I'll go, has much changed? No, not really. And this is years on. Like it's still, you'll get somebody, and you might have seen this in workplaces. There's always the one that speaks up when something goes wrong. And I've been that person every single job I've been in because people will come to me. Now, in hindsight, I've I'm that person that was never afraid of my bosses. So I'd go, Joe Blogs comes to me and says, Amy, I'm really struggling with the way Bill, the manager, speaking to me. And I'll go to Bill and say, well, Joe said that he's really concerned about this and he's too scared to come and do it himself. But I don't care. But then I'm in the firing line. Joe Bloggs isn't over there because he's got me to do his dirty work. And I've become, over the years, the person that everyone will go to. I used to get called mother in most of my jobs, or mom, because I mother the younger employees because they're too scared to say anything. But I sure as hell will say something to management when I'm watching them blatantly bully them. I was in a job where the two staff members, they have been sacked for misconduct, thank God, because I had 3 16-year-old waitresses being rated to their face by these two older in their 30s managers that would make one of these young girls cry her eyes out in front of a customer. And I would go, that is just so wrong. Like, why would you do that? That's horrible. But then you become the target because you dare speak up. And I find that really hard. And that's why I'm the same. I can't be micromanaged. I can't work for somebody that just wants to boss me about or make me feel like crap and whatever. But do you find that like the person that will speak up is the one that is targeted the most because they dare say something and like sort of break that circuit?
It's amazing actually, because I think in my 40, if you knew anybody that all my long-term friends from the RAF and probably the vast number of my bosses would tell you I'm exactly that person as well.
Mm,
Very much if you don't want my opinion, don't ask me. I'm relatively limited in vocabulary, let's say. So you just get straight, blunt talking me. Which a lot of people don't like. And now I'm a lot older, I appreciate that. But as a young thrusting officer, it was like, well, if you don't want my opinion, don't ask me for it. But if you want my opinion, I am going to tell you my opinion. And
yeah.
I never ever developed the diplomatic skill set to flower things up. Um,
Yeah.
and so all my friends would tell you, both of them, that that's exactly what I'm like. Straight to the point. But also I'm dead loyal. So I will. Loyalty cuts two ways. And it's interesting. So in my last 8 years in the RAF, I was on a squadron where I was known as the squadron uncle. So the role was completely based around my considerable experience in the RAF compared to the people that generally run flying squadrons. And the idea was that you'd be a mentor to the squadron, a bit of a coach, and a sounding board for things, given your overall big experience. Which meant many people would come to me with their problems. It'd be problems at home, work, whatever. And my job would be to go and tell the rest of the executives that there's a problem. I would never name, blogs has come to me about this, that, and the other. I would say, I'm picking up that the guys are not happy about this or whatever. And that worked brilliantly. It was fantastic. My first 3 bosses were brilliant. In fact, my second to last boss was the best boss I'd had in 40 years. She was just ace. And she replaced the boss up until that point who had been the best boss I'd had. They just got it, which I shouldn't speak out of turn here, but which for aircrew for me is unusual, but they really got it. But she in particular was fantastic. She knew how to get the best out of me and my personality as well. And that was great. Exactly. It fitted in exactly with my I personality on the disc profile, and then she was replaced by the worst boss I ever had in the RAF. He was horrendous. And unfortunately, he was supported by some other executives who were some of the worst officers I'd ever met, ever. Again, which is saying something, over 40 years. And the whole situation changed. He didn't give a monkey's what I thought, what I said, what my experience was. He would demand names from people that had spoken out of turn to me or whatever. He never got them. And he just basically, he never, we didn't have a relationship at all. After about the first 3 months, we had no relationship at all.
Gosh.
That is probably a thing that would be a whole podcast in itself. But very long story short, he gave me so much stress that I went off sick with stress in this conflict we were having.
Wow.
And he was saying all the right things to all the people above him and whatever that knew this conflict was going on about. Oh, I'm happy to go to mediation. There. And I, even as a mediator, I'm like, there is nothing to mediate here. No. We are so vastly. Don't get me wrong. I was not without fault, but my fault, I think, came out of the fact that he was the worst leader I'd ever seen. And ultimately, I left the Air Force because of him. And the way the Air Force sided with him. And it was amazing. So quite literally, something happened. I was working from home. I sat back, thought about it. I was getting anxious driving into work, and I'm 60. Why am I feeling anxious driving?
Yeah.
And I sat there, something happened, and I resigned my commission. So quite literally at 4 o'clock on, I think it was a Wednesday, 4 o'clock, just resigned my commission, sent the paperwork in, went downstairs, said to my missus, I've just resigned my commission. And I think she knew it was coming. Thursday morning, about 10 o'clock, the HR people phoned me and they're like, we just got your paperwork. I'm like, oh no, obviously we got it first thing this morning. But we've reworked all of your termination rights. And your last day in the Royal Air Force is 3 months today. So it's the 28th of February. So I'd resigned on the 29th of November, which was the day 40 years earlier that I'd signed on.
Wow.
28, 20, I can't remember exactly the day, but I think it was a Wednesday. It was definitely a Wednesday. So Thursday, they phoned me up. My last day is 3 months' time. I thought, okay, well, that's a lot quicker than I thought it would be. They said, but actually, the last day you're required to turn up for work is today. I was working from home again. And it was that was it. Quite literally, 16 hours, whatever it was, I was out. And I bore that conflict with him for quite a long time. That was the last time I ended up getting stressed at night and whatever. It was like a millstone be taken off. The stress just evaporated. And it's like, wow. Am I over it? Probably not fully. But yeah, it was a classic example though of the system. But I mean, he got promoted.
Yeah.
he delivered what was required by the system, and he was very one of these a high D on the disc profile. He probably would be driven by the task, doesn't give a monkey about the people. He'll trample over you to get to where he needs to go. And at the moment in the system, that's what the system praises at that level. Because, he did deliver what was required. And what the system doesn't really care about is what the casualties are like along the way. And so even when you've been in a job for a long time, I was 60, I'm a mediator. I've been through this sort of conflict before at work. So with all those lived experiences, you can still find yourself in conflict. And even though I'm a really good coach at coaching people how to behave, when people say, if only I could take some of my own advice, and it's that ability to know where you need to go for help. And I think we were saying before we started is I was then able at that stage to go and talk to another mate of mine who's squadron uncle on a different squadron about what was going on. And he was a really good sounding board. And I had another quick chat with the medics who were really good. And when I came to the decision to leave, it worked. But the big thing about, and I want to get across for the UK military, certainly, even if I had PTSD, which thankfully I don't, or I was under the RAF psychiatrist care, as soon as you're out, you're out. That all stops. So if you are somebody that's suffering from PTSD and you're in the military, you leave the military, and all the support the military gives you goes overnight, quite literally. There's not another 10 sessions and we're all done. When you're out, you're out. And then you have to rely on the military charities to help you. And the military covenant that we get told about, where the NHS will, put us on the top of the lists and all that doesn't happen either. So everyone who's got, you go into your hospital and it's got, we're proud signed up the military covenant. It doesn't work. Loads of soldiers, sailors and airmen out there suffering from PTSD in particular, you're just dropped back into society. And there is help out there, but it's a very difficult system to navigate. It isn't instantaneous. So you could quite literally be with your psychiatrist in the RAF today, and then tomorrow you're done. You then got to find another psychiatrist through the NHS or whatever, even if it's funded by the military or by a charity, but they're not available overnight. You might have to wait a year. And that would be the biggest thing for organizations like the military, where you think we'd get it sorted, that people just get thrown out. And I think it is the same if somebody leaves work through conflict that has led to stress, they're out, and it's then getting that conflict managed properly by the system, which I think as well as I do, is very difficult to achieve.
Gosh, that's crazy. And I do think that, for anybody that is experiencing mental health in the military, it is accessing that support, isn't it? But then I know
when you're in, it can be quite quick. So when I'd fallen out with my last boss, I was referred to DCMH, they call it, where our psychiatrists are. And I had a quick assessment because they were going to pull all my security clearances off me again. I had a quick assessment, and the psychiatrist wrote, this guy does not have any psychiatric disorder. He's just angry with his boss and the way he's been treated. The guy's just angry. Which the system, but it can be very quick when you're in the military. It can be very quick. And it is one of the things the military has got better at.
So as I always ask people right at the end of every podcast, I always say, what is that one piece of advice for somebody that is trying to find their feet, or if it was a musician, if they wanted to get into music or whatever. So I would say then for you, if someone out there is listening and they have potentially a conflict with anybody, it could be a boss, a neighbor, what would you personally advise? I know what you'll say, but I thought I'd ask that one.
I would advise, first of all, not avoid the situation, but think about what you need to die in a ditch over and what you don't. And if it's a conflict, if it is a conflict, it will need to be resolved. So if you're in an organization as an HR team or an HR consultant, then go and ask, go and tell whoever it is that would organize a mediation or whatever. I'm having this issue with my boss, let's say, and I'd really like to go to mediation if I can. There's lots of organizations out there that don't recognize mediation, but try and avoid the conflict and then go and ask somebody who can help, HR, whoever that is, who can help. If you've got a colleague that you've fallen out with, go to your manager. Bring it to somebody's attention. If you wait for somebody else to spot it, you'll wait forever. So let people know that you've got a conflict and life is getting difficult, because the longer you leave it, the more stress it's going to cause you. And the more stress you get, the less mental health fitness you have. And eventually it will overwhelm you. So go and speak to somebody straight away.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the perfect answer, because I think we're in a generation now where people don't. So I really do appreciate your time, and thank you so much for sharing all of your stories. Honestly, I could carry on for hours and hours. You've got so many
Well, me
stories.
too.
But honestly, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening, guys. You can find my podcast every Tuesday and Thursday, and don't forget to follow me on all social media platforms. See you next time.